right, so today we are going to be talking about the next of the 67 steps, the 67 frameworks that are going to help you get whatever it is you want out of life: success, wealth, health, love, happiness, whatever your goals are. So today I've named this one Martin Seligman's Salary Slave and Learned Helplessness. So we're going to talk about how you have to realize in the modern world that you are out of the cage and in the jungle. So one of the preeminent thinkers of our time, specifically when it comes to the brain, depression is one of the ways that he became famous, one of the subjects he became famous for, this Martin Seligman, still alive now, and I highly recommend. I saw one of his books here. I'm reading Learned Optimism. He wrote, I think his book's Authentic Happiness is one. And so back in 20, 30 years ago, he began to do research on depression, and his concept was positive psychology. So most of psychology had dealt with, the negative effects of people with severe mental problems. And he said, why don't we also study positive psychology, what makes us happy, not just the chronic cases of people with extreme mental health issues. So as he began to do this research, depression, he came up with this concept or this discovery of what he coined learned helplessness. Now, as you go on your path towards success, this is going to be if not the number one obstacle that you're going to run into internally and of course externally, but it will be for sure one of these prominent issues you'll have to deal with. I own different companies, and with employees and staff, it's a recurring issue. And what it is best, I think, explained with this analogy. He did some research on dogs, okay? Took dogs, and I don't know, it was a side effect. They were doing an experiment on something else. I forget what it was. And they shocked the dogs, and the dogs could not get out. They were like in a box. Then they took, of course, those dogs eventually gave up. First, the dog tried to get out and jump out, but once it realized it couldn't get out, it just would lay down, these dogs. So then Martin Seligman took those same dogs who had been taught that they couldn't escape from their issues, their pain. He took them, he put them in a box that had just a low kind of floor, a low wall that clearly the dog could jump out of. He then shocked the same dog. By the way, he struggled with the ethics of shocking dogs. He talked to one of the top professors of ethics, and the professor said, do you think the greater good of mankind will be helped from shocking these dogs? And so if you're listening to this and you empathize with the dogs, he did struggle with that. But anyway, on to the main point. Put these dogs that had been taught to be helpless under pain, put them in this box, shock them. Now, those dogs, it was clear that the dogs could jump out of the box, okay? Could jump. But because they had been trained and reinforced previously that they couldn't escape from their pain, the dogs literally just sat down, laid down there, and whimpered. Now, he took some outside dogs, some normal dogs that had never been through that preconditioning before, stuck them in the box, shocked them, and of course the dogs leapt out, jumped right out and ran off. So Martin Seligman began to say, what's going on here? Are we literally saying that we can rewire the brain towards helplessness? And the answer, I think, over his research over time was yes. And what he found is that those dogs that had been trained to be helpless experienced much lower levels of happiness, whether it be, I don't know how he measured it, maybe it was dopamine or something, but they were literally depressed. Monkeys in a cage, I like to use that analogy in addition to the dogs. So you've been to the zoo, you see these monkeys, they're in a cage. Those monkeys would seemingly be happy, right? Every morning, lunch, nighttime, the monkey brings, the zookeeper brings a pail of food or whatever, berries or whatever he's feeding the monkey, and just throws it in there. Now, remember, the monkeys come originally, if they're wild monkeys, came from a jungle. In the jungle, you've got the chance that you could die of starvation. You have the chance that you could get eaten by a, panther or leopard or whatever. You have all these potential problems if you're a monkey and you live in the jungle. So you'd think it would all be solved by being inside this cage where everything is protected. But what they found, of course, is that these monkeys are not that happy. Monkeys in a cage experience much lower levels of happiness than monkeys that are out in the jungle. So once again, by teaching these monkeys to be helpless, to rely on the zookeeper, you'd think you would be doing good for the monkeys, but you're actually lowering the happiness. Now, I think you can see where I'm going here, but that's what I want to talk about. Martin Seligman, salary slave and learned helplessness. So you and I have been conditioned in many ways to feel helpless. Now, I mentioned salaries. We're going to talk about that. Let me step back even further. You and I grew up in an educational system, right, that you're in second grade, and they not only tell you the goal. Let's say you're in social studies and they go, all right, we're going to learn how to study the history of California. So they give you the goal. Now, instead of just giving you the goal and letting you be out in the jungle and say, here's a library, here's a whole bunch of books, go out and study whatever interests you in California history. No, we're not conditioned that way in modern education. The teachers come to us, if you went to public school or most private schools, and they say, all right, Ty, today we're going to read this chapter, then we're going to read that chapter, then we're going to read the next chapter. It's just like we're monkeys in a cage, and the zookeeper is bringing us, going, here you go. Here's today's pail of slop. And what happens, we're preconditioned to feel helpless when it comes to our education. That's why when I tell people that I read a book a day, they're like, wow, what do you do? And I'm thinking, this is what everybody should be doing. You should be continually in a process of self-education. But you and I have been conditioned, and if you're not careful, that's a literal neural rewiring of your brain that, if it goes too long, becomes very hard to reverse. Yet, as Martin Seligman found, to be happy, to get the good life, you can't be the monkey in the cage. We already know simple science and research shows the monkey in the cage is not really living out a full experience as a monkey. You and I, every condition that creates helplessness in us is moving us away from the true human experience. Now, another area that you're going to, so this education, you're going to have to reprogram your mind around that, about education. When it comes to income, business, most of us have been preconditioned the same way. We're like the dog that gets shocked and we lay down. Most people are conditioned what when it comes to income? They're salary slaves. Now, let me just put a caveat. I'm not necessarily saying that anybody who receives a fixed salary is a slave. Okay? It's not that cut and dry. There could be a circumstance where it makes sense, where it's not preconditioning. But I'm telling you, if you're not careful, the next thing you know, your understanding of finances, you sitting in a cage and a zookeeper bringing you a paycheck on the 1st and the 15th of the month. My goal for you in this program is to begin to rewire your brain to go, you know what? It doesn't have to be that way. Sure, there might be phases, there's ebbs and flows where you receive salary based on certain activities you're doing, but you don't have to completely fall into that trap of thinking that your income has to come from somebody besides yourself. That's why you see these big, the news, when there's layoffs, it's like people just fall apart. It's like, and I tell people, I'm like, in the modern world, look, we're in the modern world. There is no salary, there are no jobs anymore that you're vested in for the next 50 years on a guaranteed basis. That might have happened for a very short time in history. we tend to think our understanding of history is so short. We like look back to the 50s and the 60s and we go, oh, those were the good old days when, you worked at a corporation and you stayed there forever. That was one teeny blip in the timeline of history. For most of history, you know what people have been doing? They've been agricultural. They've been growing their own food or providing for that at a more subsistence level. And then, Joel Salatin always said he loved Thomas Jefferson, came to Virginia, founder of the United States. And in the beginning of the U.S. history, what was U.S. history at the beginning? Well, like I've talked about this saying, nation's born stoic and dies Epicurean. It was a bunch of stoics. We lived in a society where people, what is the word that they called it? I think the gentleman farmer. That's what Thomas Jefferson foresaw for America. He wanted this blend of educated people, yet people who were still connected to their own income source, their own source of life and subsistence, right? We've gotten away as societies become more organized, as Will Durant talks about, as the complexity of culture grows, the complexity of an economic system grows. You end up with a country like we have now, the modern world, where there's tremendous delegation, there's tremendous fragmentation. Most of us are wearing clothes that we did not grow. I mean, we did not make ourselves, unless you're Gandhi weaving your own stuff. The division of labor there is clear. We did not grow our own food. We did not build our own house. We did not design our own car. We did not mine for or drill for the oil that fuels our car. We didn't build our own computer. There's almost nothing. It's so specialized in the division of labor now that, basically we're at a place where if you're not careful, you will fall into that trap of being in that box where you're completely helpless. So you can't completely get away from it. I went and lived at the Amish for 2.5 years. Part of the reason that I did that was because I wanted to see what the world was like before there was so much division of labor. Among the Amish, they use horses, no electricity. There is a division of labor still. There are people who are, dairy farmers and carpenters, but it's not as specialized and highly, optimized in quotations as we have in the modern world. Now, I'm not one of those people that says the modern world's bad and 100 years ago was better. It doesn't work like that. I find all of that type of thinking to be what I call this 500-year-old archaic, illogical methodology of thinking. The way I think is just cause and effect, right? So modern world, it's not good or bad. Relative to the 50s weren't good or bad. It was just a cause and effect. Depending on the outcome you want, certain cause and effects are more advantageous and certain aren't. Well, if you're looking for the good life, which entails security, but not security like the monkey in the cage, some of the division of labor, some of the advances are not necessarily advances if that's your goal. If you're trying to get right here and you're moving through time, right, every day, can't go backwards, the cause and effect of this modern world we live in could get you off track. If you're looking for the good life here, right, you could get off track. Now, we're going to talk about what you can do about it, but I first want to lay the groundwork, the foundation for you to understand how this thing goes down. So what I recommend for you, first of all, is just contemplate this. Look for areas in your life. There might be other areas of learned helplessness. Education's one. Let's talk about health, fitness. Most people, like I said, they're relying on something. The next book to come out. You go to Barnes & Noble. I go to Barnes & Noble. The number one stand there, if you walk into a bookstore now, it's just full of health books, diet books, right? There's hundreds of them, literally. I think it's, I don't know the exact statistic, but I would say, as far as I could tell anecdotally, the number one sellers of books are things related to diet. Now, why is that? Well, it's learned helplessness. People feel out of control with their body, health-wise, and so they're waiting for, quote-unquote, a pill, someone to come in and walk in and say, this is the book until you found this book, you are never healthy. In actuality, you're probably not going to get where you want through a set diet, like a 30-day diet. Health comes from a lifestyle. Everything you need to know about the lifestyle that you need to health is pretty much on any website, really. There's no magic bullet, but yet we've been so preconditioned. We talked about this before, the lottery versus the sculpture, but now I'm talking about it from the standpoint of helplessness. We're waiting. It's like, oh, I'm not going to achieve health until that next book comes out. Or I'm waiting. There's nothing to wait for. So the antithesis of this negativity that I'm talking about, this you're in a cage, is to understand that in the modern world, you are literally in the jungle. You know, I had someone the other day, they were in my office, someone new work, intern or apprentice. We have this program where people come in and want to learn. And somebody asked me a question, and you know, there's this website, I forget what it's called, but it's like, just damn Google it or something. And they were asking me a question like, where is that store? And they're like, what's the website for the store? And I literally wrote them back, and I was like, I Skyped them back, and I was just, Google it. You see, we're preconditioned to forget, or we're preconditioned to not realize that in the modern world, the jungle we're in is amazing. You don't want to be in the cage now. You know, maybe 200 years ago, when there was no social structure or no social kind of not umbrella, what's the word I'm looking for? There's nothing to catch you, right? So I went to India many years ago. In India, there are not welfare programs. There's not really shelters and food for homeless people. And I went into a hotel, and there were some people really hungry, asking for money, beggars. And you know, if you're from the U.S., you're like, oh, they're just wanting money and can't give it to all. So I went in, and when I came out, they were dead. One person had died of starvation. So in countries like India, where there's literally nothing to support you if you fall, it's pretty dangerous to be too risky with your life. Maybe you don't want to go out in the jungle in India. Maybe you want a corporate job where you get a set salary. Maybe you don't want to be an entrepreneur, because in those countries, if you fail, there's nothing there to support you. You're just literally could starve to death. Countries like, in some places even in Europe, they don't allow bankruptcy. In the United States, you can go out into the jungle, you can take the risk of leaving the cage of life and launch a business and even take loans on that business. And if you fail, okay, you can literally declare bankruptcy. There's some limits on what you can do. In some parts of Europe, you can't do that. You'll be personally liable for the loan for, you know, the rest of your life. So in the United States, we've created a jungle that you can go into as an entrepreneur that's pretty damn safe. You know, Donald Trump, in his book, I have it here somewhere, talks about how late 80s or early 90s, he suffered, you know, he said, I lost my focus in real estate. I started chasing women, and I just got distracted, and I thought everything I did would automatically turn to gold. And he said the next thing you know, this recession came around, and he was $9.2 billion in debt, right? So that's a pretty scary place to be. And he had personally guaranteed $1 billion. Yet, in the modern world, he was able to work his way out of it. So you and I sometimes are still thinking, man, the risks are so big. If I try something big, if I try, you know, to launch my own business, if I fail, it's going to be the end of the world. Well, if you live in most parts of the modern world, you're going to be just fine. So the beauty of the world we live in now is that you can stop being the monkey in the cage, rely on other people. You can, you know, the cage doors are open now. It's just a fantasy. It's just a projection of a lock there. You can just walk right out. And when you walk out, you're going into a much tamer jungle now. And that's what I want people to realize. If you try to get in great shape, right? Maybe you're experimenting different approaches to your health. Maybe you're working out really hard, or maybe you're trying different, food regimes or whatever it is. If you hurt yourself, the jungle now, you're supported by modern medicine, right? You start jogging a lot and all of a sudden you hurt your ankle, you can go and have x-rays and you can have all this. So the jungle's not scary when it comes to your health. As we talked about, if you decide to quit your job or maybe keep your job but simultaneously launch a side business to see if you can get out into the entrepreneurial jungle of life, if you fail, it's not that bad. You're probably not going to end up homeless. And if you do end up homeless, I had one of my brothers was not making a lot of money, and I said, "You're here in Hollywood, can't pay your rent? Go be homeless for a week." He's a guy. It's probably a little bit more dangerous for women to do this, but my advice to him is, hey, you'll be fine. The jungle of the modern world, modern crime's at the lowest rate it's ever been, I think, in history, or at least in modern history. I'm like, you're in sunny California, it's 75 degrees. What do you fear? I interviewed this UFC fighter, Brendan Schaub. Big Brown is his name. He's a heavyweight contender in the UFC. And he said, I said, what'd you do right? And he's like, I took risks, man. You're never going to get there without taking those risks. And so, like I said, even to be a UFC fighter now, if you look back, I was looking back at pictures of boxing fights 50 years ago or 100 years ago. They used to let you fight almost to the death. Now, if you're a fighter, there's doctors waiting. We're so supported. We're in even the jungle of life now when it comes to health or wealth is so safe of a place that I can't believe how many people stay in the cage where you're going to be less happy. You're de-optimizing your life. You're de-optimizing your happiness. Why the heck not go out into this cage? It's the same with love. Social. Health, wealth, love, social. People are afraid, let's say, to, if they're single, I'm like, try Match.com, try eHarmony. 1 out of 5 marriages, eHarmony says, per day in the United States comes from eHarmony. But people are like, well, I'm worried. What if I go out on a date and it's a psycho? I'm like, take the risk. Be smart. You don't have to have them come to your house. Meet in a public place. You're so supported in the modern world. The odds, and we talk about media bias, people are always worried about, some stranger stalking them. And that does happen. But, if you look at the facts, if you forget media bias and the anthropic principle, you realize that, that's not what happens. It's like 90% of all assaults come from people that you know. So get out there. The odds of you making friends and something really bad happening to you are so low. They could happen. You need to take necessary precautions, but get out there. If you're lonely, take a risk. Go out into the jungle of the social life. If you're a guy, go down to a place where there's a lot of women and talk to 50 of them. Take the risk. Because let's say all of them laugh at you and you have the worst experience ever. Well, in the modern world, the jungle, I should say, there's so many people, you'll never see those women again unless you live in a town of 50 people. Most people in the world now live in urban areas. You'll be fine. You see, even the risks socially are so small that you might as well get out there in the jungle and try. So this jungle represents risk. And I'm saying that with risk, if you do it right, will come reward. And the reward is the good life. Staying with what is safe is a false economy. It's penny wise and dollar foolish for most of us. Now, again, I want to just say, put a caveat here. It doesn't mean instantly quit your job. Instantly try a crazy new health workout. Instantly, no, you can make haste slowly, as Joel Salatin used to tell me, or as John Wooden, the great UCLA coach, used to say, be quick but not in a hurry. So Peter Drucker here, he talks about the 18-month goal. So over 18 months, you can begin to step out in the jungle. You don't need to quit your job today necessarily if you feel that you're a salary slave. You can transition your way out of it. For some of you, you should quit today. For some of you, you should never quit. You see, it's not necessarily a black and white like all people who are paid a salary are slaves. No. Theoretically, you could be an entrepreneur and be a slave, right? It's a mindset that comes from thinking things are out of control. And the most important thing I want you to get from today is that although some things are out of our control, there are things left to fate that are out of our control. What Martin Seligman says when he studied depressed people, people who were not successful, people who did not get what they wanted, they had a feeling that they were completely out of control of their own destiny. They were like the dog who was shocked and laid down and didn't realize they could jump out. So I want you to go deeply into your brain and think of those areas where you have been susceptible to saying this is out of my control. For many people, it's marriage or children. Social is a huge area. You feel locked in. I will tell you, Jeff Bezos, he has this great line. Let me see if I can find it here, where he was quoted in the book, The Everything Store. And he was saying, Bezos was talking to somebody who was complaining that something couldn't be solved. Let's see if I can. This is just such a great line that he said here. So he says, we're going to innovate out of our problems. Innovate out. Innovating out of wherever you are is the solution. So the antithesis of helplessness is creativity. That's what you have to remember. You must move from a place of helplessness to a place of creativity. I call this, and we'll talk about this later, man on the moon principle. Basically says if humans could put a man on the moon, which is very difficult, took 1,000 PhDs, it took every known, I think like $1 trillion worth of technology, hundreds of PhDs, it's been 40 years, and they got someone to the moon. So if that's true, if we're not helpless to be stuck on planet Earth, we're not in the cage anymore, even confined by the boundaries of our atmosphere, we can get out. I bet you can get out of each and every problem that you have. If you're listening to this, you're 100 pounds overweight, you're not helpless to fix yourself. There's no Barnes and Noble book that's going to fix it. Now, you might find some insight in a book, and you know that I love books, but you can innovate your way out of this, and that's what I want you to do. I want you to remove all learned helplessness, and it can start, like I said, I can't tell you how many people come apprentice or intern for me, and they literally don't use Google 100 times a day. They'll ask me the stupidest questions, as if we live in a world. I can understand that my grandma was born in 1918. World War I was still going. Horse and buggies were still going. And people, you couldn't search on Google. I remember I went to New Zealand and I had to I was visiting some farm or something, and I was on a payphone with a calling card. There was no cell phones. So communication, you felt kind of helpless. And I felt helpless because I knew if I started driving, there was no way to call people on the phone. If I got lost in the middle of nowhere, I was lost potentially for hours. It's not a very populated country, New Zealand. And so I was taking all these notes like, okay, go left at the dirt road, go right at the tree. And at that point, maybe you could justify a level of helplessness, right? Because you didn't have any way. But I'll have people now go, how do I get to your house? And I'm thinking, we're in the modern world. We're in the 21st century. Are you so helpless in life that you don't know how to use GPS? I'm like, come on. Think here. Innovate your way out. I had an Uber driver, a taxi driver, okay? That taxi driver literally did not know how to find my house. And when we were driving somewhere, I said, let me get this straight. You are a taxi driver. Your profession is getting people from one location to another. And you are so helpless that you're asking me. I was like, I didn't want to pay that taxi driver. I was like, buy a GPS. Right now, they're on most phones, or you can get them for $50. But that person, I remember him saying, well, I don't know how to do it. He was so deep in learned helplessness, so far down the rabbit hole of life, that I knew this person was not living a good life. If you've come to the place where you're a taxi driver and don't realize all the tools that are available to you, you have bigger fish to fry. You have huge problems. A lot of people say, well, I only make, $10 an hour, $20. I don't make enough money. Well, innovate your way out of it. As Elon Musk says, you get paid in proportion to the difficulty of problems you solve. That taxi driver was not solving a very hard problem. He was just driving a car, and he couldn't even solve the problem of getting me from one place to another. So if he didn't like his income, I was like, look, man, innovate your way out of this through creativity. Become smarter. Become a better taxi driver. Next thing you know, you own your taxi service. Next thing you know, other people will be working for you. Next thing you'll sell that and grow and grow. And the next thing you know, my friend, you'll have what you want. But as long as you're in the place of helplessness. Now, you might laugh, and I might laugh at this taxi driver and be like, what an idiot. But think hard about your own life. Think hard about your own life. You probably have a huge area, and I probably at any given point, let me find this. I can't find the quote. Sometimes I've got so many quotes, I need to have an engine to run the quotes, and even if I search them, too many come up. But try this in your own life. Let's do a little mental exercise. Usually financial is the best place to start, because this is the biggest area in my experience of learned helplessness for people. Ever had a dream? Alan Nation, my second mentor, said, go back to 14 years old. He said, that's when your mind was the clearest. Interesting. I'm in Mensa and the IQ Society, and they say that 14 is like the peak of your IQ in many ways, right? Your mind's firing on all cylinders. You don't have the stress. You don't have the senescence and the aging and all this that comes. So you might have the wisdom, but just, back when I was 14, I could remember anything, do math like this. So when you're 14, what'd you want to do career-wise? Some of you maybe astronaut. Some of you want to be actor, doctor, nurse, millionaire, singer, or whatever it is. So why didn't you pursue that career? Why not? Now, most of you and myself, if we answer that question honestly, it's because we were victims of learned helplessness. We didn't innovate our way into whatever we wanted to do creatively. We listened to people who said, oh, no, you can't do that, instead of saying, I live in the modern world. What can't you do? I wanted to play professional basketball. Now, that's a pretty tough one to do, but I could have, let's say I wasn't quite good enough to play pro basketball. I was good enough to play, high school, college level, but I could innovate my way out of it. My real goal was to be, I liked sports. I liked basketball. I could have been a coach. I could have been an executive, all these things. Now, as I've gotten older now, I'm getting back around. I'd love to own a professional basketball team one day. But I was a victim of learned helplessness. I learned from people, because most of this is learned from the millions of people with learned helplessness around us. I had learned that set a goal, I'm in a cage, I see it out there, but I can't get it. And I was like the dog who just laid down. I shouldn't have laid down. Think about something you wanted to do career-wise. I guarantee you've given up on something. Sometimes wisely they've given up, but more often than not, you gave up because you were a victim of lack of creativity. You were a victim of being a victim. There's a victimhood that comes from being a victim. There are people who get everything they want. One of the books on my book recommended list, and I hope you read this, is Arnold Schwarzenegger's book, Total Recall, his autobiography. It is an example of a human who said, I want something, and everything he wanted, he got. Now for him, it was creativity, and it was another element that I want you to write down if you're writing down. And that is, he realized it was what we call reps and sets. Okay? He realized if he did enough practice on something, whether it be his body or his accent to become an actor, or each and every area, he could innovate and grow into that role. And he did. He got everything he wanted. He was 7-time Mr. Olympia. He wanted to be a millionaire before he's 30. He learned real estate. He said, how did I learn real estate? And I opened a weight business delivering weights by mail. He said, to learn real estate, I just tracked down every realtor and I said, teach me what you know. He was here in Santa Monica. He just went up to people, teach me, teach me, teach me, teach me. See, he wasn't helpless. He knew they weren't going to come to him. I have so many people going, well, I'm waiting to find a mentor. They're not coming to you. There'll never be a day that Bill Gates calls me up and says, hey, Ty, I saw your 67 steps and I want to fly to your house here in Hollywood. No, if I want it, I go. So you need impetus. You need drive to get what you want. That's something you're going to need if you live outside of this cage in the modern world where this jungle has all the fruit that you want. Very few leopards waiting to kill you. We have support systems built into our society that basically ensure no leopard's going to eat you. It's all there waiting for you. So, I want you to ask yourself long and hard on this specific area. I want you to write this down now. Write this here on the page, short, publicly, read other people's, and write your own. Just an instance, an example, be specific. Maybe it was around a business you wanted to start, but you never started it because you felt helpless. You didn't innovate. You didn't have the drive. You didn't have the creativity to go out, track down the people you needed, to track down the finance you needed. You know, the story of Colonel Sanders. He had an idea about chicken, and he asked 1,000 people to it. He asked one by one, people said no to him. And the 1,000th person he asked said yes and gave him the money to start Kentucky Fried Chicken, which went on to be the largest franchise at that time, restaurant franchise. He didn't give up. He was never helpless. I want you to stop being helpless. So what's an area you've been helpless around in the past? And now, in retrospect, in hindsight, what would you do differently? That's what I want you to focus on. In the past, let's take a creative area in your life. It could be around your body, health-wise. It could be around wealth. It could be around your social, your relationships. Something you felt helpless, or if you want, you can do today. I'd rather you do in the past. Has a little less emotional charge to it. What is that thing? And now, knowing that you live in a modern world where there's tools all around you. You can get loans now. There's a market, Silicon Valley, to fund every crazy idea in the world. There's crowdsourcing now online. There's Kickstarter now to start a business. Oh, you don't like your body? There's retreats you can go on where they could help you control your diet. There's hundreds of diet books. There's personal trainers at every corner. There wasn't personal trainers 100 years ago at all. Now you can get a personal trainer. There's support groups. You can work out with other people. Everything's there. Love, you feel lonely? There's not only dating sites if you're single, but there's social networks like Facebook. 100 years ago, you lost touch with a friend. You'd never find them again. You were helpless. Today, with the tools you have, it's all there. You feel unfulfilled? The tools are there. Start with reading the book, Learned Optimism, or The Meaningful Life or Authentic Happiness by Martin Seligman. All the tools are right there. Oprah, whatever it is, Norman Vincent Peale, book on, optimism, positive power, positive thinking. Every tool is there for you. You can't be lazy. Remember what Charlie Munger says? Invert if you want to know what's going to ruin your life. Sloth and unreliability. Laziness. When those interns ask me something they could Google, I'm like, you're being lazy. Laziness will get you killed in the jungle. Unreliability, doing things well one day but not the next, it'll kill you out in the jungle. There's still some things that'll kill you in the jungle, but they're easy to solve. That's why I made this 67 videos. It's funny. Video 1 of the 67 steps, hundreds or thousands of people watch. The next video, a little bit less. I'm hoping, and I've talked to you about this in the welcome video, make sure you get to the 67th video and you watch each of them no matter how hard it is. Be reliable. Rewire your brain that when you set your mind to something, you always do it. Right? Habits are what can keep you alive or kill you out in the jungle. The risk isn't very very big anymore. If you're a fear-based person, relax a little bit, like Jonah Hill said. the actor. I wish, looking back, I had relaxed a little bit more. It's not as scary of a world anymore. If you were living in India in the 1700s, yeah, you better freak out if you don't have enough money or food stored up. Now, you're probably going to be okay. Not many people dying in the streets anymore of starvation. You can innovate. The only people who truly get stuck in the modern world are the people who are like that dog who lay down, like that monkey waiting. Don't be that. So think of this. Write this on the social page here. One specific instance you were helpless, and now in hindsight, what you could have done to get what you wanted that you didn't do, but now you realize how you could do it. Be as specific as possible, and then print off the worksheet or write in your journal the long answer. These journals that you're keeping for 67 pages you'll have need to be, 3 or 4 paragraphs, okay? So I hope this has been helpful. Pick up Martin Seligman's book, pick up Arnold Schwarzenegger's Total Recall, and I will see you on the next step. Thanks so much.